Hello, friends. How do you know when you're in fear or in faith? What are those telltale signs? How do they affect the relationships you're in, your friendships? And how can you switch from fear to faith? That's what Joey and I will be exploring with you today. See you in a sec.
When I'm in need of a great big grin, I know where to go for some oxytocin. When the whole world seems to be cold and mean, I know who to call for some dopamine. I'll be your Lucy, you'll be my Ethel, I'll be the Thelma, you'll be Louise, and we'll ride together till we reach the rainbow's end. Thank you for being my friend.
Welcome to Anatomy of Friendship. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Cal.
All right. So we want to talk about fear to faith. We've had some personal conversations about this. Do you have how would you like to start it?
Well, first, I just want to say I'm smiling because I love our song that we all had a hand in, that Dana, wrote and that Karina sang, and I'm smiling. I sing it every time. I hear it in my head. It makes me really, really happy. So that's
Me
the first
too.
thing I have to say before I can go
Me
anywhere.
too. Me
I
too.
was thinking, I was thinking as we were talking about fear and faith, I was thinking about the conversation that we were having just before we started filming
Mm,
about you telling the story about the river and there being chaos on one side and rigidity on the other, and that the only like true place to be is in the river, in the flow. And I know I love to talk about the river and the flow, but I hadn't heard that thing about
mhm.
the chaos on one side, the rigidity on the other. And as you
Yeah.
were saying, I was thinking maybe instead of fear or faith, for some people it might even sound better to say fear or flow. Wouldn't that be kind of fun?
Oh, oh, I
you know
love that.
yeah, because I was
I
thinking
love that.
faith is a word that
Yeah,
sometimes
it's
people relate
loaded
to religion and
for
they
sure.
struggle with it, and then they can toss the whole conversation out.
Exactly.
So and
Ooh, ooh,
I
ooh,
love to be in
ooh.
that middle place of, like, how can everyone listen? Because I'm yes, I was born Jewish, and yes, you went to, you were a Catholic girl, but we're both
Mhm.
very non-denominational as well. And,
Mm.
we love our nature. We love, I anyway, I don't want anybody to be left out because that there's any words that are loaded. So I just thought of that as we were starting. Do you want to comment on that at all? Because lately I could really go on and blab and blab.
Yep. I don't know. Oh, I'm not sure who said this, but I heard it. I was listening to We Can Do Hard Things, a podcast that I love,
I
and
love.
they were talking about that's where I heard this two banks idea, and I can't remember the poet or theologian who talked about it first, but basically they said there's two banks of the river. One side is chaos, mayhem. The other side of the river is very strict, orderly, kind of rigidity. And the way we want to live our lives is in the flow of the river. And if we're in the flow of the river, sometimes we'll bump up against the side of the river that is chaotic, and sometimes we'll bump up against the side of the river that is rigid, but we don't live on those banks. We live in the flow of the river and we trust it.
Or we want to.
So, what's that?
Or we want to.
We want
We
to. Yeah,
want to. Our
exactly,
intention
exactly,
is to.
exactly. Okay, so I wanna bring in a different context. I might have talked about this in an earlier episode, but this is something that is the way my brain compartmentalizes it. So, adding to this metaphor of the river. So, um, there's the Shakespeare perspective that all of life is a stage. Have we talked about this recently? I think about it all the time, so I don't know how often I say it out loud. So correct me if I've gone on and on about this, but act 1, we're born, we're beautiful, we're bright, we're shiny. We are in that river. We are we're like literally there's like the water that breaks and we're flowing and we're crying and we're laughing and we're just perfect little precious angels. And that is act 1 of our life. And then act 2 begins sometimes with that first smack for some people. But we could say that really it's when we have our first heartbreak, our first rug pulled out from underneath us moment, our first disappointment, our first whack in the world. And for some people, it's very young. Some of us, it's when we are in love the first time and that person doesn't love us back, or our friend group, we find out they're talking behind our backs and we're devastated or we're cast out. Whatever that is, that's the break in belonging. And every single time a trauma happens, we adopt a mask, a coping mechanism. Sometimes it's often the same coping mechanism. For some of us, we have so many different coping mechanisms, but they all have the same basic ingredients where they are a little bit they're a mask. They're not exactly our authenticity. It might be close to what we actually are like, but it's a little bit like Debbie Ford would say, turned up too many dials too high or dialed up too high or too
Like
low.
Enneagram says that.
Right.
The
So
Enneagram says that too.
and in the end, by the time we get to the end, the banks of act 2, we're suffering, we're struggling because yes, we have masks. Yes, we've mastered those masks. They've become second nature, but they stop working. Or they work so well and we have the imposter syndrome, but usually basically it just doesn't work anymore. So we're at a crisis point, and for some people, this is if they're going to take themselves off the planet, it's at the end of act 2 because their vulnerability didn't work and their coping mechanisms didn't work. So there's like a, well, F you, God, or whoever got me here. I'm out of here. But if you're open to it, if you have some kind of a this is why I think faith is important. It helps, but usually there's some come to Jesus moment, some kind of a dropping to your knees, some kind of a humility where we open up and say, God, I need your help, or somebody, I need help. I can't do this anymore. And often that's when grace takes place. And that's when Act 3 begins. And Act 3 is like that scene in Indiana Jones where he steps across that invisible bridge, where you don't have the density, you don't have the security of what you leaned on in act 2, the security with air quotes around it that really didn't keep you secure, but kept you familiar. And often the whole of act 3 is about this big leap of faith. And I think this is where human 2.0 takes place. This is where we want our relationships to take place primarily. So I think when we talk about flow, getting in the river, this is an act 3 phenomenon. And it's also it heralds back to act 1, but in act 3 we're adults, we're conscious. In act 1 it was a freebie. Act 3 we have to earn it. So it's not all we're not always gonna be in that flow. I think just like Joseph Campbell talks about in The Hero's Journey, all of the stages of the hero's journey, they're nonlinear. Sometimes they happen all at once, and you might be at the end and then suddenly find yourself in the middle or in the beginning. So I think even if we know we have a spiritual practice, we have great friends, and we've created a foundation of a lot of flow, being in that river, we're still sometimes going to cling to those banks of the river. And we're sometimes going to go back and put on those familiar masks. Sometimes they just pop right on without us even knowing. If we get out of bed too quickly, if we forget to meditate, if we forget to do our morning practice, it's a lot easier for those masks to pop on. So I think this feels like the context that I want to bring in about this, about our, faith or flow. So what is that bringing up for you, Joe? And hey, that
Oh,
rhymes.
wow. Oh my gosh. Um, I think as you were talking, I was picturing this river, and I was talking about before we got on, we were talking about you and me being in a little pea pod in a little pea pod canoe going down the river, and that we might hit the banks. Um, I think
We will
I
hit
think
the
it might
banks.
we do hit the banks.
Yeah.
I think that my own, like, spiritual crashes in my life, my own masks that were no longer working, my own, um, compensations that had just petered out and were worn out, or like you said, the ones that are working, but they're really not sustainable.
Mm.
Um, you know, like, to be specific, I feel like I don't wanna be, too, like,
Yeah.
platitude
Vague.
here, but, like, yeah, like, I had a divorce. It was really painful. I had a boyfriend that was a drug addict, and I thought I could love him to health. I've talked about that in some of the other episodes. Um, my son ended up with schizophrenia. My loved ones have addiction or mental illness. Um, my best efforts, my most loving efforts, my most powerful efforts often exhausted me and wore my body out and ruined my relationship and deprived me of, like, I just couldn't see. I was so busy acting like a god, like a superhero, that that was fear. That was fear masked as love. That was
Mhm.
fear masked as, "I wanna help you." That was fear saying, "You shouldn't be in this pain. Someone needs to help you. Someone needs to rescue you,
Mm.
and it's me, and I'm capable, and I'm strong enough." That's a really intense mask that I had, that
What
still
is the
slaps
mask?
itself onto my
Just
face.
if
What
you
is
could
the mask?
identify it.
I think it, for simplicity's sake, otherwise I have to sit here and think. For simplicity's sake, I wanna call it superhero.
Yeah.
Superhero, because I'm capable. I'm independent,
Right.
I'm strong, I'm smart, I'm capable, and I'm also compassionate, empathic, I'm loving, and I'm traumatized enough to believe that to my trauma has put thoughts in my head that things shouldn't be this way.
Right.
Children shouldn't get beaten. Parents shouldn't be using drugs and alcohol and be unavailable to their families. People shouldn't lie. I had all these shoulds and shouldn'ts that I developed before I had a fully formed frontal lobe that helps me to understand that you can't understand everything.
Right. Ooh.
So I think that the place inside of me that believes that things shouldn't be that way, or that someone should get help, or that they
Mm.
shouldn't be in pain,
Ooh.
or that they're not responsible for their life story, or that God has them. I didn't I was such a
Mm.
mixture of I didn't believe in God for a long time. Um, and then I started searching for God. Um, so I want to make sure that I don't just ramble without a point. My point is my
I
point is that the many times that this particular superhero mask or superhero cape has, automatically or with my own hands been put on me, I have often been pushed to my knees in exhaustion and waving the white flag saying, "I give up. Like, I can't
Mhm.
believe that I can't save this person." Or that I gave as much as I did and it didn't make a difference, or that my love wasn't enough and therefore I wasn't enough.
Mm.
But I had
Mm.
identified myself with my self-proclaimed purpose, and it forced me, and we've talked about this many times, but it forced me to my knees, literally and figuratively. It forced me to my knees, head to the carpet, snot and tears, until the most painful moment of fear turned into the most peaceful moment of surrender, because
Ooh.
I couldn't let
Yeah.
in that help until I said, "I can't, you can."
Right. Right.
And so that's the big gross version. I don't mean gross like yucky. I mean like the gross story,
Yeah.
like your gross income. That's like the gross story. And then I would love to make sure before we're done with our podcast that we talk about the daily ways that
Yeah.
our masks fly back on, that fear flies back on, what it feels like, how to identify it, and what to do. But that's like my big story that I just wanted to say regarding
Mhm.
the way fear has acted in my life in the form of certain masks that are not really, yeah, they're not real love, they're not real faith. And okay, do you have something pop in?
I do. And I've never quite so I am having this new little pop, so I don't know exactly how I'm gonna word this, but we'll see how it comes out. I'm trying to think back to an early mask of mine, and I wanna say that there was a moment when an authority figure caught me, quote, unquote, "being lazy," and what lazy was for me back then was being in the flow. Like, I think I was chasing butterflies. I was just calm and not, like, feeling stressed about anything, just feeling like what feels good, what feels pleasurable, and in my feeling, there was this, like, whack, lazy, and there was this tightening in my chest and, like, everything freezing up and this hypervigilance that was born, and this belief system that I can be lazy, but just don't get caught being lazy. So I've said all that before, but the piece that I hadn't said before was I'm seeing this gap between my, let's just say, my flowing self that in the past I've called lazy, and what it takes for me to be in Athena mode, what we call Athena mode, which is kind of bada bing, bada boom, getting stuff done mode. So that wasn't my first inclination. I mean, when I was in junior high, I got all D's one report card. And my mom was so upset. Why? And I was like, because I don't care. I don't care about grades. Grades are like, so. So I didn't care. I didn't care about homework. I would throw it in this, I would throw it away. I didn't care. And finally, I was getting into trouble. And I got sick one day. I woke up with a stiff neck, and I remember I couldn't go to school that day. And I had nothing else to do because I had to go to work with my mom, and I was just sitting there while she was working, and I was in and I started to do my homework because I had nothing else to do. So I was prepared for school when I came in the next day, and I raised my hand and I had something to contribute, and the teacher was like, "Kelly, is that you raising your hand?" And I had something to contribute to the conversation, and the teacher, I remember, was like, "Whoa, what got into you?" And it felt good to actually be on the ball and to suddenly, and so I just, that kind of awakened something in me that we could call my Athena, the, "Ooh, I wanna be a part of the world. I want to do well in the world." And then, early 20s trying to break out into on my own, that's when the real Athena stepped in, where it was like, I have a to-do list and I've got stuff I need to do. But there is a gap between my chilled out self and my bada bing, bada boom self. And it feels, I guess, like two different banks of a river. I mean, it does feel like they are separate personalities. And I've gotten used to pulling myself up by my bootstraps and like getting in. It's kind of like going from my, I don't know if I'm on the river or on the outside of it, but it feels like there's this militant part of me that is used to going, "All right." My dad used to come into my room when he would take me on jogs because he was my coach with a pretend bugle. "Get your ass out of bed and your feet on the ground. Let's go, let's go." So there's this like shock, but I do it. I know how to suit up and show up. And so I can get into that mode, but it's often very much like William Shatner in Star Trek. Like, here I am, I'm reporting for duty, Pilot Sullivan, Private Sullivan or Pilot, whatever I am. And I might be scattered, might be stressed, but I'm here and I'm ready for action. but it's because I haven't really caught up with myself. I'm not integrated. So what I'm learning now, so I haven't quite expressed that. So I think my favorite way is when all parts of me are online, and when I can be in flow and still get stuff done. It just takes a minute. It takes a longer morning ritual. I have to write my dreams down. I need to take time. I can't just snap my fingers and expect all parts of me to report for duty. I have to call them and sort of take bring them in, and it just takes a minute. So, I don't know. Once I'm all together, I feel like, "Okay, now we can go swimming." But there's a gap. And maybe that's the nature of ADHD, which I don't know if I officially have or not, but I might. So back to you, Joe.
Uh, I think I want to have you share something in particular
Yeah.
because you've been talking a lot about how when you're in the flow, you would not be on time. And when you're on time, it like
Yeah.
stresses
Yeah.
you and puts you
Yeah.
in this like hurry state. And you told the story about Dana working
Mm.
with, was it a monk or shamans or
It
who
was a
was it?
shaman, Joseph Rael.
Okay, so
Yeah. Oh,
I want you to talk about that because I want you to talk about it, tell the story, but I
ooh,
want you to like keep going down the rabbit hole for yourself about integrating
yeah.
flow and time.
Okay. So the long story short was Dana, my husband, he's a musician, music producer, but sometimes filmmaker. And he made a movie called Dreaming Heaven. And he was filming this shaman, Joseph Rael, doing a ceremony. It was a burying a hatchet ceremony, and it was out, I think, in the Mojave Desert somewhere. I'm not exactly positive, but big desert. And I was talking to Dana every night after he was done filming out wherever he was every day. And this one night, I remember the energy was so beautiful. I was sitting with Shannon on her front porch, and I had him on speaker, and we were both in awe of Dana because of the state of mind he was in. He was in such a grounded but high state. We were both just like wanting to soak up what he was on. And he had been around this shaman who's just high, high, high frequency shaman. And what Dana was saying was he thought before the shoot that filming a shaman and all of the people that go along with that shaman, it would be like herding cats. Like, okay, we're, 9 o'clock, we start filming. He would have thought people would still be sleeping. They'd be on top of a mountain somewhere in their teepee doing whatever. He just thought it was going to be a shit show. But he said it was absolutely the opposite. He said he has never been on a film shoot that ran more like a Swiss clock than this particular shoot. And nobody was stressed out about the time, but Dana kept noticing the time. And it was like, oh, this is exactly what time we thought we were going to finish today. Oh, this is exactly when we told everybody to be here. Oh, this is exactly when we asked that the food would arrive. Oh, this is like everything had a precision to it. And his philosophy, because he knows I've struggled with time, being on time, being late has been like a thing of mine in the past. But he was saying, because I've said, well, I can be on time, but if I'm going to be on time, I'm going to be a biatch and I'm going to be like a little military version of myself. I'm not going to be juicy. Or you get the inflow version of me that is super, super magical and juicy and emotional and available and present, but I will have no sense of time. I might be 3 days late if you let me be in my flow all the way. But this distinction that Dana bumped into was like, what if when you're really spiritually connected, like that first, spiritually connected first, that brings you into time in the earth plane, not because you're beholden to time, but it just naturally makes you more like, able to be on time. Kind of like what you and I were talking about. Maybe you wanna say something about the being safe and not well, and the being
Mm,
in the light actually makes you more safe as opposed to okay, I'll let you
mm.
pick up where I just left off,
Yeah,
however you want to do it.
I'm not sure if I wanna go down on that road only because I feel like it's taking us off of the point of this topic. Do you think it's taking us off faith versus
No,
fear?
not at all, even though I feel like it's an added layer, but go where you're inspired.
Okay.
I trust your flow.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway, it's interesting that you were talking about maybe ADHD because ADHD, it is, I mean, I watch a million videos on it because my partner has ADHD, as you know. And time is like one of the most difficult
Mhm.
things for people with ADHD. Like it is, it just like it's like a whole other world
Yeah.
in their heads. It's a very, it's not a personal failing, it's a completely different clock. And so, it's caused a lot of trouble in our relationship until we started to identify it. It's caused a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding that, her behavior was disrespectful, unloving, unkind, unaware. Um, yeah, like it's years and years and years it's taken us to get where we are right now to understand that she struggles with time and that how she is around it isn't personal and that this is how I could be supportive and like it's really very sweet actually now. It's very sweet. She'll point to herself and she goes, "Ah, it's ADHD." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry. That must be hard." Instead of, "Ah, you're such a jackass."
Mhm.
God, like God.
How
Anyway,
disrespectful, right.
yeah, how disrespectful, and it's like, there's a lot of neurodivergence in my world, including in myself, and so I'm just learning how to frame everyone's neurodivergence. Maybe we could just call it everyone's bioindividuality, which is what we call it in holistic health. Bio means
Or
life, and individuality is individual. Like we're
or
all individuals in life.
neurospicy.
Oh, that's right,
Which I
neurospicy.
can't
That's
remember
right. Who said that to you?
who's the
Yeah, who
artist
said
who
that
calls
to
it
you?
neurospicy.
Oh, oh no,
But
isn't it isn't it oh
we don't have
god,
to know it right now, we'll
Aspen.
figure it out.
Isn't it Aspen?
Nope. No, no,
Oh,
Aspen
that's so
Mattis.
funny.
No, it's a
Okay.
singer, and she's brilliant, and she has a lyric in one of her songs. We'll link it in the show notes
Okay,
somewhere.
that's so funny.
Yeah, yeah,
All
it's
right,
really
so
good.
I kinda wanna rein our river in here though, rein the river, um, to say that I myself, when I feel like I'm supposed to do more or be more in order to be lovable, and I think most of us, unless you don't have a conscience. Oh my God, I was watching a show last night about a little girl who had no conscience. And she
Oh.
just wanted what she wanted and choked her little brother in order to get what she wanted and had no remorse, zero. She was a total psychopath and she was like 8 years old. So that scared me so bad because I thought, oh God, she's in a completely other world. Like
Yeah, yeah,
none of our logic works on people like that. That is like they're all about
it's a
getting what
different
they
world.
want, however they have to, and they're smart,
Mhm.
smart, smart. I just really felt for this character. Why am I going off on this tangent though? Please rein me in.
Because it's about getting
Why
our
did I go off?
needs met, I don't know.
Yes, okay, because most of us have masks as a way to feel lovable and
And
not
enough.
worthy, and enough,
Right.
right. So if you didn't have a conscience, you wouldn't put on a mask. You would maybe
Right.
manipulate, you it would be different. It would be like manipulation versus
Yeah.
putting on a mask in order to be
In
lovable
order
or
to
acceptable by the
deliberately a
right,
deliberate
right.
mask.
Right,
Right.
a deliberate right,
Yes.
right. So that's
Yeah.
different. Like this is like these are reactive masks we put on because we're afraid people have discovered that there's something wrong with us. We're broken, we're not enough in some way. There's always that language we have. I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not skinny, fat enough, old enough, young enough,
Mhm.
on the right spectrum sexually, on the right spectrum whatever,
Right.
neurodivergently or neurospicily, like
Spicy.
whatever it is, all of us have I created a new word, spicily. Um, anyway, I think as long as we have conscience and we care about people loving us, then most of us have donned some kind of mask. And that mask is really from fear that I'm not lovable as I am, and so I have to do something in order to be lovable, and that inherently is a fear thought because God don't make shit.
Right.
I
Yes.
think
Bam.
life is
Yeah.
inherent, like, life is inherent. In life, there is love, and now I realize we could go on a tangent about how life is light and light can be bright or light can be very dense on this dualistic planet, and we can say, well, that murderer doesn't have light, and we can say, well, that murderer was trying to get some need met. I don't, whatever, I don't even want to go there, whatever. We'll do that another time. It's worthy of talking about
Yeah.
the array of light and dark that we have on this planet, but inherently in this conversation we're talking about, most of the time we have masks on. It's because we don't think we are good enough, and therefore we have to mask up in order
Exactly.
to be good enough, and that
Yes.
is a
It's a
fear
more trouble.
response.
Yes.
So I want to ground this conversation.
Ooh.
What do our fear responses look like?
Well,
Go
I
on.
think the idea for this conversation came from a conversation you and I had the other day where we were working with a wonderful tech person that you brought in to help us figure out passwords and stuff. And I got flustered because my Zoom wasn't working and there was all kinds of stuff and I didn't want to be late. So by the time I got in, I was like, okay, let's do this. Boom, boom, boom. And I was kind of just, I think if I was going to speak on my own behalf as a lawyer, I would say, well, Kelly was just trying to make up for having been sort of late and blustery coming in by trying to move the conversation along so we could get things done more quickly as a way to honor our wonderful tech guy. And I didn't mean to be an asshole. I just was trying to be efficient and like I was kind of moving the screen and like clicking on things without waiting for him to lead. I was kind of being the person in the dance that was also leading because I wanted to I thought I should co-create with him as opposed to him having to pick up my hand and lead me when I already sort of knew some stuff. And what I knew, I thought I was being helpful, but at the end of the conversation, you let me know, can we have a sign when I feel like you're stepping on toes or when your energy is revved too high? And I was first of all, I was kind of like, excuse me. I I was perfect. I mean, there's some little ouch, like, oh shit. I got busted. I got called out. She doesn't like something I did. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. But I was like, yes, yeah, put your hand on your heart. If I can see you, I'll take that as a message to stop, pause, take a breath, and do my best to kind of modulate. So let me go back for a second. In human design, which we've talked about before, personality typing, astrology, Kabbalah, I
System.
Ching, chakra system, blah, blah, blah. Look it up. I have the sacral center defined. And what I learned about that defined is that, and it's unconsciously defined. So sometimes it's like an energizer bunny that just goes, 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 goes. And it feels so good that I'm going. And then I look around and people are angry at me, even though I thought I was doing good. But I learned I need to check in as a manifestor generator. I need to check in along the way to make sure that I have it. My energy hasn't completely ramped up so far that I've left people feeling like roadkill in the street. So I have so if I have a little bit of fear or a little bit of I'm not enough or a little bit of I'm running late, that's just that little drop can land on my sacral and it can turn it up a few notches too high. So that's what you and I you what you were saying to me was a blessing to me because you said it in the most perfect way. I give you an A plus in communication because you didn't shame me and you were also very simple and graceful about it. Can I do something? Like you were solution oriented about it because it's going to happen again. And you gave me something to be able to do in order to come back to center. And I want to be centered. So the a distinction was the desire in me to be efficient and to be in what I call Athena mode, that's lovely and fine, but with one drop of fear in that, it gets funky. And when I'm in the faith version or the flow, as we're now calling it, the flow version of Athena, I don't think people end up feeling left being zapped or stepped on by me. So I feel like that sort of grounds some of that. Back to you.
Yes, no, that totally does. Thank you for saying that. I think one of the tools that I like to use is like if I'm driving and I get like a little harried or hurried and when I'm driving, I always imagine the Saint Amaji sitting next to me in the car.
Oh,
And I'm
Lord.
like, would I act this way if Amaji was here? Or would I be like, to me, every spiritual leader, if they were in my car, who I would want to be is totally present. Like that's who I'd want. If I had Pema Chodron in my car, I would want to be present. If I had the Dalai Lama in my car, I would wanna be present. So, I think about, my partner, for those of you that don't know, Krista, she went to go see Thich Nhat Hanh in person speaking, and he's no longer on the planet. God bless him and all of his service to humanity. Holy mackerel. Um, but she would talk about how he'd be sitting on his stool, this huge audience of people, and next to him is a little table with his tea. And he would stop and pick up his teacup and just have a sip. And then he'd put his teacup down and then he'd think for a moment and he'd start talking. And I think of that all the time because how often when you're talking to somebody, you're like, okay, like you'll take a sip really quick and then you'll start talking before you even finish swallowing. I don't mean you, I mean us, and I
Of course,
use
that
those
wouldn't be me.
visuals. Of course not. I use those visuals to be who I wanna be,
Mm,
like, when I'm in the kitchen and I'm dropping things or I, forget to close a cupboard or I bash into something, I'm like, "Oh, I'm not present." And I use that as a sign to get present. Like, I will go put something down on the counter, and I think I said this the other day, and, like, I'll be an inch from the counter, and I will drop it and then go on to the next thing, and then it's on the floor because I
mhm,
wasn't with the spoon or whatever it was.
mhm,
I was a step ahead. So that's one of the if we can start looking if we could use this conversation to look
mhm.
for the tiny little ways that we get unpresent, then we can put in the antidote. And the
So,
antidote is, "Oh, let's breathe." Go on.
well, maybe let's get into the antidote, but first let's talk about what are the telltale signs of being in fear, not being in the flow. So how do you know when you're off, when you've been dialed up a couple notches too high?
Okay, so if I look if I okay, so if my
Mm,
preferential set point is that I'm sitting with Amaji and I am breathing and I am watching my tone, the speed of my tone, the energy of my tone, and the gentleness and softness in my body. If I call that my desirable set point, under all circumstances, unless someone's, blood is spurting out, and then go ahead and get adrenalized if you want to, it'll help you focus.
mhm,
Um, then I kind of judge myself up against that. And that means that I'm a ballerina in the kitchen. I'm a ballerina when I'm,
mm,
folding laundry. I'm a ballerina when I put it away. And when I'm not,
mm.
then I know that I'm a step ahead. And sometimes all I do is have awareness without even changing. I'm just like, yep, I'm moving fast. That's right. No one's here to watch me
That's a
not bumping
step.
into anyone. I'm glad you're here, not Amaji. I'm glad you're not here, Amaji, because I don't want you to see me being this way. And I'm just noticing it, and I'm going to use this little bit of adrenaline to get shit done. But okay, no, I really don't want to be that way because my body's been through way too much, and that adrenaline is poison for me right now. It's not,
Ooh.
like Adrenaline should be saved for moments of actual emergency, not like you said, not your daily Wednesday. Adrenaline is not for your daily Wednesday. It's not your daily fuel. It's not your cup of adrenaline. You know, there's a reason that our inner apothecaries are used, and we're so grateful for them, but then we abuse them like we're all freaking addicts, using the inner apothecary of adrenaline to shoot ourselves up with uppers so that we can be more and do more in order to
Mhm.
be loved. But if we were coming from love to begin with, we wouldn't have to do anything to be loved. We'd already be love itself.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just thinking about IFS, internal family systems, and I'm so aware of my speedy self, which I call the tap dancer. You call yours
Dash.
Dash. So there's Dash and the tap dancer that hang out together, and they can be like thinking they're getting somewhere really fast, but it's like they just created a bunch of like chaotic shit, but it feels productive, I think.
Yeah, it
But
feels productive.
it is a very, if I'm honest, which what else am I going to be? It is a big one. It is a
Yeah.
big one of, it is a big part of mine. So much so that I could even hear that part when you were talking slow. I was kind of, that part was going, oh, hurry up. That is so annoying. And, but the other me, the act three me, friggin' loved it because I feel like you're kind of, it's actually the most efficient thing, most efficient, not deficient, the most efficient thing you can do because talk about dividing the loaves and fishes. This is how we divide time, create more, create like a time warp where we do more. Like, what is that Taoist saying? Do less, accomplish more, take it
Yeah.
to an extreme, do nothing, accomplish everything. So in those gaps, it's where it's at. So one of my telltale signs that I'm not in the river, that I'm not in act 3, that I'm not in flow is I can feel a tightness in my chest. I can feel like a like kind of a fist and a tightness in my shoulders also. That's a big one. I always have I not always, but I often have like something grabbing my shoulders. And it's a thought that runs in the background that like, "Hurry up. I can't believe this is taking so long. Oh my god, Kelly, you're oh my god, really? You do" like, there's this, like, yelling at me part that is just like that coach, that authority figure from the past that caught me being lazy, that thinks things should be 10 times faster. I should be 10 steps ahead, not 1 step ahead. Are you kidding me? 10 steps ahead. So, tightness, adrenaline, speed in my voice, and even like a critical thought that kind of leads to a depressive feeling. And I try to get out of the depressive feeling by doing more. So, we could spend hours probably dissecting all the way the telltale signs. I mean, even in my voice, even in my tone, I can feel it, and it's always just right there.
Mhm.
But as we wrap this show up, let's talk about how we when we notice we're 1 step or 10 steps or 100 steps ahead of where we are, then what do we do? How do you bring yourself back?
Okay. So, I think having a relationship with a calm set point is important
Yes.
so that we have perspective. So, yeah.
Ding, ding, ding. Mic drop on that. Like, that I think is essential. If we don't know what it feels like to be in the river, then it's really hard to know, like, where's our why, where are we headed? So, starting there, that is a key. Keep going.
Yeah, and there's a lot going on in my life, so I have to meditate morning and night and breathe during the day in order to even find that set point. So anyway, my set point is actually quite do more, be more. So the newer set point that I'm creating with my conscious mind happens through meditation, happens through sitting, happens through breathing, and happens through, praying, honestly. Um, so, okay, so number one, have a relationship with a new, calm set point. Have a relationship with what the body feels like when it's having graceful, gentle energy flowing. And for those of you that don't meditate, if you would just tune into your hands and see if you could feel any buzzing in your fingers or your hands. And if you don't, rub your hands together and then open them up and see if you feel any buzzing. And then you have some gentle sign to focus on that brings you into your body. It brings me, I want to talk about me. It brings me into my body. When I can get into my body, then I can have a little bit of awareness and a little bit more control. If my heart starts beating faster and I can actually feel my own heartbeat, you're not supposed to be able to feel your own heartbeat. As you sit here, you're not supposed to even be able to tune into your own heartbeat. If you can tune into your own heartbeat, which I can, and if I notice that it's just a little faster, it's a little bit, it's like a little stressed. And then if I tune into my voice again, like if I say to my partner, I'm really sorry for doing that, versus I'm
Oh,
so sorry for doing that. Like, who's talking? Who is talking? You say those words, well, I said I was sorry. But were you? Like, who was talking when you said you were sorry, right? If I'm tripping, if I
oh,
if I drop things, if I find myself excusing myself or, sorry, I gotta go, without that being respectful of another human being, I'm not sure that the means justify the end. The ends justify the
ends
means.
justify the means.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like, hurrying up with someone because we're honoring time over humans, I think is really a telltale sign that we've got maybe our values flipped. Um, unless, of course, you're gonna be late for your airplane, you're like, "Oh, we gotta go, let's go," and,
Screw you,
we just
I'm a G.
decide to.
Move
Yeah,
it.
Amaji, let's run. Amaji's
There's
like,
time to hug
"No."
later on the
Yeah, Amaji's
plane.
like, "No, we'll miss our plane.
We
I'm not
are the
running."
plane.
Right? And then I would say another thing is if my energy is swirling in such a way, or I'm noticing that my breath is faster, or I'm like sighing, that's another sign that I'm like a little bit ahead of myself or a lot ahead of myself, or thinking that the future is going to give me some peace, and the future is only now. That came later. So there's only power in the now. So those are just my few things. Do you have anything popping up for you?
I do. I do.
And then let's do some strategies when you're done with yours.
Well, speaking of time, we're way past
Mhm.
what I thought we were gonna do.
Yeah.
So, we'll see where we go. My
Okay.
strategies are whenever we pray, that feels like a slam dunk. It just does it. It switches me from act 2 to act 3, from the banks of the river,
Mhm.
puts me right in the river.
Mhm.
And it's not the kind of beseeching prayer, "Dear God, give me this." It's the affirmative style of prayer that we learned at Agape, religious science, kind of affirming that God is right here, right now, closer than my breathing, nearer than my hands and feet. Oh, yeah, I'm in the oneness. And then affirming that whatever I need comes to me on time, in time, and wherever I go, there I'm at. And there's just gratitude, and then I release my attachments. And actually, I added to the affirmative prayer the releasing at the beginning, because I always
Mm.
find that I need to let go. I need to take some breaths. I begin the prayer with letting go, letting go, letting go. And then I breathe in, call in that sunlight of the spirit. So that if I just called in the sunlight of the spirit first, I feel like it's there's no room for it to hit. So I have to let go first in order to fill up. That's a big one for me. Sometimes I
Yeah,
think
huge.
exercise is good for me. Like I notice when I come
Mhm,
home and my dog's all amped up, I can't just calm her down. Sometimes I just have to immediately take her on a walk to get that energy out. So I think it's the same with myself. Like if I'm amped up, I just need to go on a run, go on a walk, move my body, dance, just something physical to move it out.
mhm,
Um, just taking a breath, like you said, just stopping
mhm.
and taking a few deliberate deep breaths. That's a big one. And just being in a state of gratitude, looking for what can I be grateful for? Because I notice, and there was a study actually years ago. I was on Fox News talking about this study, even though it wasn't my study, but I was just commenting on it. It was about how to get a good night's sleep. And so I'm going off on a tangent here, but I'll bring it back. So the idea was so many people that are busy, very alpha oriented worker bee people, just working people. We tend to do a lot of sleep working where we're dreaming about our work. And there's kind of stressful dreams that aren't necessarily deeply relaxing or taking us to anywhere new, which is one of the gifts of our dreams is to take us out of work, out of ordinary and oh, wow, unicorns, what's that? I could use that and bring that into my work as opposed to just circling around the office in the dream. And the study was saying that the best thing to do is to write two lists. One list is a list of all the things that you have to do the next day that would have you be on top of things, productive, efficient. Oh, I need to make that phone call. I need to send that email. I need to go to the bank. I need to. So make that list so that your subconscious mind doesn't have to ruminate on it because it's trying to help you remember that you have to make that list. So do your subconscious mind a favor and make the list before you go to sleep so it's done. Your subconscious mind to say, oh, we don't have to focus on that. She already knows to do
Right.
that.
Already
And then the
clarity,
other
right?
list is 10 things that you're grateful for. And
Mm,
that can be as simple as,
yeah.
oh, I'm breathing. Oh, I have a bed to
I'm
sleep in
seeing.
tonight.
Yeah.
I'm seeing.
I'm
Yeah, I'm
seeing.
seeing.
Yeah.
Oh, that. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they could, the clothes on my body, the person I get to be in bed with, the whatever it is, just 10 things because there's something that happens by the time we get to like the eighth or ninth thing, there's the serotonin kicks in. There's this little bit of serotonin that starts happening because it's like it's as if to say that if we have the wherewithal to be grateful, even if there's stressful circumstances around us, if we have the wherewithal to be grateful, we must be safe. A person could
Mhm.
only make a gratitude list if they are intrinsically safe. If there was a fire breathing dragon chasing us, we would not take the time to do a gratitude list. So we
Right.
must be relatively okay. Hi, Pearl. So that calms us, and then we can go to sleep with a little bit of serotonin. It relaxes us, and we're able to have a better night's sleep, and then able to possibly have our dreams take us into more flights of fancy and fantasy than just kind of sleepwalking. So those are some of the things I know how to do to come back. And a
Mm,
download to my Buffy, my Joe. I
yes.
lead sometimes
Yes.
just do
True.
a hurls to pearl, get the hurls out, and then finding the pearls brings me back into the center of the river. So anything you
Mm,
wanna say
I love
to
that. Yeah, I just wanna add a couple things.
Sure.
Thank you, first of all. Those are beautiful. Stop, drop, and meditate. It's one of my
Mm,
little paintings I've had on the wall. Breathe, like you said, just take a breath. One cleansing breath. People say, "I don't have time to meditate." Well, you have time for one breath, and if you don't have time for one breath, you better reconsider your values. Um,
nice.
in really hard moments when I'm really super struggling, I will get on my hands and knees. I will get on
Yes,
my knees. I will put my
same.
forehead to the carpet. I will say, "God, please help me," or "Breath, please help me. Universe, please help me," whatever language that is.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say is literally moving my body gracefully. If my body
Mm.
is moving fast,
Ooh,
my heart is
active.
moving fast. Yeah, and grace is such a beautiful word. Grace is like this gift from God. This, grace is also uh, to physically move in a graceful way. And I believe we can access God's grace with physical grace. And that tells us also if I'm moving gently, I am safe. So I love what you said about safety. And I think
Ooh,
that might be enough for now, unless you have something else popping before you close us.
I do. So to our beautiful friend who's watching, if you have if you have telltale signs that let you know when you're in fear versus in flow, we wanna hear them. And if you have a strategy for how to get from being on the banks of fear into the flow of the river, we wanna hear those. So, until we all meet again, thank you for being our
Thank you
friend.
for being our friend.
Thank you for joining us on Anatomy of Friendship.
If this has been helpful to you, or if you have questions or comments,
Please share them with us at anatomy-of-friendship.com.
if you haven't yet, take a moment to follow, like, and subscribe to our show.
And don't forget to share it with a friend or two or a few.
Special shout out to Dana Walden at Love Hub Productions for being our engineer, producer, and for writing our friendship song.
And Karina Grandma for being the voice of our song. Take it away, Karina.
Thank you